So the whole negative pastor's kid stereotype that goes wild, especially the pastor's daughter that just goes wild and does freaky things and makes really bad decisions like the prodigal son in the Bible and just all this bad stuff, and it's like, oh, they're just terrible parents. No, they just have kids that have free will that didn't make the best decisions. Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Also, Butter says hello. She's chilling in here asleep with me today while I'm filming. But today I just thought I'd tackle, address, talk about, basically here to just shed light on my personal experience that my family has had of being a pastor's daughter or living in a family that does ministry, in active vocational ministry. Because I feel like there's a lot of different stereotypes that come to people's mind whenever you hear the phrase pastor's kid or pastor's daughter, especially pastor's daughter for some reason. So I'm just here to talk about my experience and just, I guess, give you guys a little inside knowledge on what it actually is like growing up in ministry, and what I've also noticed in other people that I've met whose fathers are also pastors, or who live in a family that does vocational ministry, if like their mom's active in ministry or whatever. So first, I just kind of want to talk about that my family is a little bit different of a pastor's family because we have moved a lot. Like, we've lived in 7 to 10 states, I can't really remember, and Florida is where I've lived here the longest. I've lived here for 8 years now with our family, and we know for a fact that God has called us to stay here at this church, which is wonderful. We were homeschooled full-time mainly because of that, because we just moved so much that going in and out of public schools would have been pretty tumultuous, and so it was honestly kind of lonely growing up, in the sense of my only friends really were my family. And although I thought moving to Florida and settling down, I thought for a short time, would kind of alleviate some of that level of loneliness, and in a sense it has within the past, I'd say 2 years only, but we've been here 8. But what my sisters and I actually came to realize is that just being in full-time vocational ministry, especially that of being in a pastor's family, it still is fairly lonely at times. It still is hard to have friends and relationships that are consistent and genuine, I guess I would say. And it's sometimes been really difficult, but I've just learned that it just comes with the calling of being set apart. Like, you can't be set apart and live set apart if you're living around everybody else. But as a pastor's family, you are definitely called to be set apart, but you also feel like you live in a glass box sometimes, especially as a parent, like how people so easily watch and criticize the family of a pastor and equate that to the level of ability that they have to serve and lead a church. And now, to an extent, if you're an incredibly unhealthy person at home, an unhealthy family at home, and you're in vocational ministry, that is something you do need to get a hold of, because that's more of a reflection of your spiritual walk, the maturity of your walk and of your family, and what kind of biblical truth you're raising in your family, or lack thereof. So that is something to be discerning of, but is not something to inherently cast judgment upon for saying that, oh, because your kid did this, or because this happened, or because they started having a temper tantrum, obviously that means they're not fit to preach this Sunday, or something like that. Like, I don't know if that's ever happened in my family. If they have, they just haven't told us, but I do know that for those in ministry, the level of criticism is high and hard and heavy and very hurtful and targeted. But it's really honestly just given me a heart of mercy towards those that act out of a spirit of criticism, because you know that the only reason that they feel bold enough to say that or do that is because something going on in their life is not settled with the Lord. Something going on in their life is not right, to the point where they feel like they have to act out of that spirit of criticism. Sorry guys, Butter decided she didn't want to hang out with me anymore. But we're just gonna jump back into it. So basically, one thing that I really wanted to tackle in this video is the whole pastor's kid stereotype that has basically followed my family for a very long time, and I feel like follows a lot of pastors' kids. Now, in our church right now, not many people refer to me or talk to me and my sisters like the pastor's kids, which I love so much. Like, we have a very healthy church, and I'm so thankful for that. And so many people just see us as people and as others who serve in church. And it's just, we are known and seen and talked to for the most part just as people and as fellow servants in the church and as fellow members of the church that serve in the church with them, which I love so much. But that's only a very recent thing. Either way, we have still not come out unscathed by the whole pastor's kid stereotype that for some reason still lingers in our society. And I don't know why. Honestly, I feel like it is just a form of warfare and attack on pastors' kids and pastors' families because of the high calling that they do have on their lives, that they're very easily attacked. But I'm sure everyone that's been involved in a church actively or grown up in church has met a pastor's kid that maybe it has not made the wisest decisions, or maybe you know of someone or have heard stories of people who just end up deviating from the path of Christianity and going somewhere far to the left or the right of it that's not straight ahead. And that's honestly so heartbreaking and so sad, but it really, when you think about it, it kind of goes back to putting your pastor and your leadership on a pedestal, as if, yes, we are called to be set apart and live righteously because we know we're being watched and we're setting example, but at the same time we're also we're still humans, we're still just Christians who deserve just as much mercy from all other Christians as those who aren't in vocational ministry. But it's honestly just one of those things where it's like, if you take the pastor's family off the pedestal of pastor's family and all the social connotations that our society has put on that nowadays, and you just see them as Christians who are serving in the church and as those who have been redeemed and saved and forgiven and set free, it'll make so much more sense when I tell you this. We mess up too. And we have free will too. And we experience questions and problems and life challenges too. I know that may sound a little bit crazy for some of you guys who think that somehow pastors' families' lives are just like sunshine and rainbows and just like beautiful flowers and healthy, beautiful families and all that kind of stuff. But parents in ministry have to work just as hard as parents out of ministry, maybe even harder, to raise their children and to raise their children in truth. And my parents always say this, they're like, we've never been parents before. This is our first time doing this, guys. Like, we're really trying our best and we're praying through it and we're trying to be Christ-like parents and reflect Christ from us into you guys and set an example. But at the end of the day, we've still never done this before. And every time we enter a new stage of life with you guys, this is new for us as well, to be in this side as parents, walking you through this stage of life. So give us grace. And now, personally, my parents, I have a very, 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 very healthy family. And I know that is something that is so rare. And I am so thankful for that, honestly, because I don't know, I think that's just one of the blessings that God allowed my family to have because of how diligently my family has worked to seek and strive after Christ and be the parents that God has called them to be, despite all the challenges that come with being in ministry. Like, He honored their obedience and the desire of their heart to just train up their children in truth. So yes, there is what you train your children in, the truth you train your children in will not leave them, but at the end of the day, it's their choice on whether they want to take it, believe it, and act on it in their own personal lives. So the whole negative pastor's kid stereotype that goes wild, especially the pastor's daughter that just goes wild and does freaky things and makes really bad decisions like the prodigal son in the Bible and just all this bad stuff, and it's like, oh, they're just terrible parents. No, they just have kids that have free will that didn't make the best decisions. Maybe that's partly a reflection on the parents themselves and what they train their children up into, but you never know for sure. You're not that child. You're not in their mind. Who are you to say that you know everything that's gone in on their life to make them get to that point where they made that decision that walked them down that road? I cannot say that for my own sisters because I'm not living in their mind. The only person that I have control over is myself and my decisions. So even my mess ups are not a reflection of my parents' teaching or my sister's teaching or my church's influence. It's me and what I choose to do with the free will God has given me and what I choose to do with the level of convictions that He has put in me to pursue righteousness or not. So yes, it's incredibly important as a parent, ministry family or not, to be biblically grounded, to be biblically solid, to train your children up in truth with consistency and with love. We're all subject to the fall of man. We're all subject to having free will and making bad decisions, but we're also all given mercy and grace and redemption. You know, like in the story in the Bible when the people drag forward a woman caught in adultery and they say, like, to Jesus to test him, like, what are you going to do with her? Because the law says we can stone her. And he starts writing in the sand. Don't know what he wrote in the sand. Probably something cool or something really simple. But he writes in the sand. He says, okay, yeah, you're right. That is the rule. But he who has not sinned can cast the first stone. So go ahead. And everyone left one by one except for Jesus standing there because he is the only one credible enough, righteous enough, and sin-free in order to be able to rightfully and righteously cast punishment upon this woman. I mean, yes, we are supposed to make sure, like, keep our other believers in check, but not out of spite, not out of extreme judgment with ill intentions, but out of wanting to prevent them from walking down a wrong path, wanting to prevent them from straying from God's will in their life. That should be your intention. If that's not your intention, stop with all the judging and the meanness and the criticism to both pastors' kids and normal kids. So yeah, now that rant is over, I just hope you guys understand, if you didn't before, the high calling and the high standards and the glass box that pastors' families or ministry families live in and are called to live up to. And we need mercy and grace, but we also need kindness and encouragement, because it is a very, very lonely calling sometimes, because it's kind of like the bystander effect that you learn about in social psychology, where everyone thinks that everyone else is going to be the one to encourage or compliment or be nice or kind to the other person, so they feel like they don't have to because we just expect the other person to. Just like bystander effect in social psychology is whenever you're in a large group and someone hurts themselves or falls down, nobody usually does anything because we all expect everybody else to be the one to go choose it. And sometimes we do that to ministry workers in the church. Very often. We don't pray for them because we think everybody else is praying for them, so what are my prayers to them? It's just white noise to God, probably. Or I don't need to encourage them. I don't need to go out of my way to speak life into them or thank them or lift them up in any way because I'm sure somebody else has already done it. No, odds are no one's done it. Odds are the amount of people actually praying for the pastors and the leaders of the church is very small, because they actually are the ones that understand that, you know, even if other people are doing it doesn't mean I shouldn't. They take the initiative to support the leaders, so support those who have been anointed, support those who have been called and placed in that level of leadership for a reason. So being that person of kindness, that person of peace, that safe space for crying out loud, that safe space for them to be able to go to and just feel like a seen, known, and loved person, and not a judged and stereotyped and prejudiced leader, is so needed sometimes. And it is, I'm sure if you do that with any of your church leaders, it'll be more than appreciated, because God will use you to really bless them and encourage them, because you never know what kind of discouragement is going on in any of the minds of any leaders. And your one little word of encouragement or wisdom or act of kindness may really help carry them through that time and carry them out of that season of discouragement. So you have a voice, you have a purpose of being in the church, and if you're not in a church, you really need to get into one, because it is, again, the life source of the community that God has called the Acts Church to be, which is all of us, the capital C church. There is a necessary reason for that. And so, yeah, just encourage your pastors and pastors' families. Remind yourself anytime you look on them to not look at them on a pedestal, because nowhere in the Bible does it say that being called and held to a higher standard means being put on a pedestal. Not there. They're just called and held to a higher standard, but they are not meant to be seen and put on a pedestal as greater than thou, and if they mess up, that means they're worse than thou. It's not how grace works, guys. So that was just my little encouragement to you from a pastor's daughter to, I don't know, others, and maybe to even just speak life and encouragement into those who are in active ministry, who are pastors' kids or ministry kids who sometimes feel the same way I have felt growing up, of just sometimes that loneliness or being set apart. It's not you being weird. It's not you being odd. It's you being set apart and called because God has something for you and wants to do something with you that sometimes requires you being a little bit distanced from those who are probably not living as righteously as the way God has called you to live. And that's okay. So thank you guys for watching and listening to my big spiel on being and growing up in a pastor's family. And I wouldn't trade it for the world, but I do think some people need to be given an inside picture on what it's really like so you can appreciate the calling more. So thank you guys for watching. Do not forget to like and subscribe down below. I will see you guys next week for my next video.